I've been to Hershey Park twice now, and today I will be ranking the top 14 coasters at Hershey Park. This park has had many coasters come and go, but the ones they have now are very quality. This is my favorite park that I've ever been to, and I think it could be the best in America, although I haven't been to Cedar Point yet. This park is just so amazing, and you should definitely check it out. Anyways, let's go on with this video. At number 14, we have Coco Cruiser, and this is the only coaster I haven't ridden at Hershey Park, but it does look like a pretty decent kiddie coaster. It looks pretty smooth. I wouldn't imagine it's not, and it's probably a decent ride. Anyways, let's move on from our kiddie coasters to our family coasters with Trailblazer, and this coaster actually kind of surprised me on my first ride. I rode it in the second to front row, and it was actually pretty good. This coaster is smooth, and although it doesn't have any drops, the turns are pretty cool, and I like the helixes and the setting. This coaster is mostly meant for families, where it earns this place on the list, but I do think it is overall a pretty fun ride. I think this is a pretty controversial opinion, but I actually think this one is better than the one at Great Adventure, Runaway Mine Train, because of its smoothness, its setting, and other factors, like how it doesn't feel that janky. But it is just a bunch of turns and some helixes, no drops, definitely pretty much a kiddie coaster kind of family. But the one at Great Adventure is rougher, and it is a lot more uncomfortable. The hills, even though there is the Death Hill, which is the best moment on any of the two rides, this one, I think overall, is just a much better ride. This coaster also goes right next to Stormrunner with a really good setting and color scheme. All the coasters at Hershey Park are very well painted, and Hershey Park definitely takes care of their coasters. And I'm pretty sure this is the oldest steel coaster at Hershey Park, which is surprising for how smooth it is, and I just really like this ride. Even though it's not a high spot on this list, I think it's pretty underrated. The stats are pretty bad considering how old it is. 45 miles per hour, 52 feet, and 1,600 feet long, 1 minute and 15 seconds. It's not that bad, but anyways, let's move on. At our number 12 spot, we have Wild Mouse. Now, this coaster, I don't think is too bad. It's better than the one at Dorney Park, but I don't think it's too good. If you have ridden many other Wild Mice, you might know what this feels like. It's not very rough, it's not too janky, but it is a bunch of laterals and a bunch of sharp turns. They can kind of feel uncomfortable because they can slam you to the side, and it's not that good. This coaster did open up in 1999, though, by Mock Rides, so, it's pretty standard. Most parks have one of these. If you haven't ridden one, it's basically just a bunch of sharp turns like this, with some laterals, and then it goes into a few small dips, which don't give really any airtime. They're just kind of fun. But some Wild Mice can be trimmed pretty hard, which means it gets slowed down a lot from the brakes because they run multiple trains, so that can hurt the ride experience. But I did notice that I don't think any of my rides are really that trimmed. Even though I only got 2 rides, this is still not bad. But a much better wild coaster is on the other side of the park, which I will talk about much later in the video. Anyways, let's move on to Laugh Track. And this coaster, it's pretty fun. It's alright. It's smooth. The restraints are decent. The trains are pretty cool because you can go backwards. The spinning's not too much, but, it is much better. If this coaster wasn't a spinning coaster, I would imagine that would not be enjoyable. Instead, I'm glad that it spins at least a little bit, but definitely not too crazy. When I rode both times, there was no lights on. So any of this theming you see, that's not what I looked at. I just saw big dark blocks, and it's not very enjoyable. I think I would rather seen it with the lights on, but that's just me though. This coaster does have really bad capacity with its 4 people per train, so this coaster can get a pretty long line that can extend outside the building, which inside the building there's a bunch of mirrors. It's pretty cool, but it can get really long lines. A Mauer spinner, similar to the one at Alton Towers, Spinball Wizard, and plenty of other ones in the world. Anyways, let's move on to Jolly Rancher Remix. Now, I think this is pretty surprising because most people don't have it this low, but I don't like this ride that much. Even though it's my favorite and the best Vekoma boomerang out there for its theming, smoothness, and restraints, I just don't like it as much as some of the other coasters on here. I find that the Cobra Roll is pretty janky, and it's just not that fun of a ride overall. But this coaster is pretty forceful though, with a G-force of 5.2 Gs and a height of 116.5 feet, a length of 935 feet, which goes around twice, a speed of 47 miles per hour, inversions 3, which they go around twice, so 6, and it's just alright. I mean, the 3 inversions are decent. I always usually like the backwards drop and the backwards vertical loop, but I just think this ride is a little bit overrated, and I place it here for those reasons. The tunnel is a cool effect that's not found on any other boomerangs, so I do like that part, but you are barely in it. And if you're here and only have a short amount of time, just go across the midway and go to Stormrunner, because that's a much better ride that you'll see later on this video. Anyways, let's move on to Lightning Racer. Now, this ride is not that good. I thought it would be a lot better than it is, but it is over Jolly Rancher Remix, and it is this far on the list, so it's decent. Now, this was actually my first dueling coaster, and it did duel on the one time that I rode, which I would expect because HERSHEYPARK has some pretty decent operations. But the ride experience, besides the dueling, it's not that great. This coaster is pretty rough, and it's mostly just the twister layout. I didn't notice any airtime, and I just don't think this coaster is that good. I do like the GCI Millennium Flyer trains, though, because they are pretty comfortable, and the restraints aren't that bad. However, this coaster never has a long line because it's all the way tucked in the back of the park, pretty far away from Wildcat's Revenge, Laugh Track, so you're going to have to walk a little bit to get here, but you're definitely not going to have to wait. I'm not sure if I sat in a wheel seat or not, but this coaster was pretty rough. I don't think it's that much of an enjoyable experience, but it was well enough to reach here. That tunnel right there is probably the best part of the ride. I don't know if I noticed any airtime, but it was just cool. There's 2 sides, Thunder and Lightning. Now, when I rode, I forget which side won, but I'm pretty sure I was on the Thunder side, and I think I lost. But I could have been on Lightning, and I still lost because I don't remember winning. Now, you could consider this a family coaster with stats of only being 90 feet, 50 miles an hour, and 3,300 feet of track. But, I don't think the families would enjoy this one because of how rough it is, and just not overall a great ride. Anyways, let's move on to another coaster that is also wooden. We have Comet, and I'm pretty sure this is the oldest operating coaster at HERSHEYPARK, and it gets a lot of love and a lot of lines. This is probably the longest line in the park by far, with at its peak having about 1.5 hours probably, and I'm only rode it once in the front row, and that was at opening. This coaster is pretty good. I think it's 75 years old or more, and it has some pretty good spots of airtime. It's not even that rough. I really love the setting next to Skyra. The color scheme looks pretty cool too, and the stats aren't even too bad considering when it was built. 84 feet, 78-foot drop, 50 miles an hour, 3,300 feet of track, and a duration of 1 minute and 45 seconds. Now, that's not too bad, considering this coaster was built in 1946. This is my favorite of the current operating wooden coasters at HERSHEYPARK, and the setting is just really cool. Next to Sky Rush, with the grass, over the water, it's really cool. This is a wooden coaster at HERSHEYPARK that the families would love. This coaster is pretty tame, but it does give good airtime. Some weird things I noticed is that this coaster uses some very, very loud friction brakes that are made out of wood, and this coaster station is angled surprisingly steeply downwards. And I'm pretty sure this coaster got new trains in 2024, and they're the PTC trains, like the ones on Boulder Dash, or other main wooden coasters. Anyways, let's move on to a very underrated roller coaster. This is Super Duper Looper, and this is a lot of people's first looping coasters. I know it was my sister's first, and this coaster needs a lot more love because it is such a fun ride. It's very smooth, not janky at all, and it is pretty forceful too. Although there's no airtime, I just think it's a really fun and enjoyable ride experience that's pretty much like a monorail, but a little faster and through the forest. This coaster also is right next to Great Bear and intertwines with it. It's really cool. And this coaster's setting is so cool in the forest with all the trees. I love whizzing by the trees in the trenches on the helix. It's very fun. The only inversion of the loop is very forceful, and other than that, there's a few decently forceful moments, but it's pretty calm. It goes back inside the loop again, and after that, there's this tunnel, and many people wouldn't expect this, but it is usually pretty pitch black in this, and I like it. It's pretty cool. This coaster's color scheme isn't the best, but the blue and the white loop does look really good. This coaster occasionally gets long lines, but it's usually pretty short lines. I usually only waited to walk on for this, and it is a pretty fun coaster overall. Anyways, let's get our second thrill coaster on here with Great Bear. This coaster is pretty fun. It does try to rip your legs off sometimes, though. It's decently intense, and the setting's really cool, too. It's also very unique and has some crazy maneuvers. But one of the most unique elements on this coaster is this helix right after the chain lift. Then it goes into its drop, which I've never seen really ever on a coaster like this. Anyways, this coaster has pretty good stats. Drop of 124 feet, which is taller than the height of 90 feet, the length of 2,800 feet, a speed of 58 miles an hour, has 4 inversions, and the duration is 2 minutes and 55 seconds, which is really good. However, if you're not bracing for some of these maneuvers, it can definitely bang your head around. It's not too uncomfortable, but it is something to look out for. Like this one right here, where it banks to the left, and then it goes into this corkscrew. It is pretty cool, but it can bang your head around. Anyways, now let's go to Fahrenheit. This is a pretty underrated coaster, and I think this is really fun. This coaster does get a really long line sometimes, and it is crazy how long this line can get. It can get up to 90 minutes or more, just like Great Bear, which I had to wait an hour and 20 minutes for on my first visit, which is one of the worst queue lines ever, but I rode it on my last visit, the first thing nearly, and in the front row, and it was definitely worth it, that 5-minute wait. Anyways, let's talk about Fahrenheit. This coaster has 2 great ejector airtime moments with that hill and the first drop. The restraints aren't even that bad, with the hard over-the-shoulder restraints converted to the soft over-the-shoulder restraints manufactured by Intamin. The inversions, like this Norwegian loop, are very fun, and I really like them. It also has 2 very fast corkscrews, which are also really fun. However, this coaster can have a little bit of a rattle, which means it's a little bit rough. It's nothing too crazy, but there is a noticeable vibration. This coaster is more of like a B&M or Gerstlauer coaster, and because it has so many inversions, not like an Intamin. This coaster also has some really cool near misses with many of its structures, and it has good stats too. Anyways, let's move on to the famous HERSHEYPARK top 4. These coasters are all really good. Starting it off, we have Stormrunner. Now this is the best Intamin accelerator coaster out there, except for maybe Formula Rosa. But that doesn't mean it's a bad ride. It means that it's a great ride. This coaster has an insane 75 miles an hour in 2 seconds launch, which is absolutely insane. Then it also has 3 great airtime moments that are all ejector. It has this crazy, somehow, really big drop, and this really cool Immelman inversion, which is different than other ones. Then it has one of the things that it's known for, the flying snake dive. This is a very fun and disorienting element that starts it off with airtime. However, this coaster is very short, and it's smooth though. Anyways, let's move on to Candemonium. This is one of the park's newest coasters, and they actually had to take out a golf course that is owned by someone else and buy it to get the land for this coaster. This is currently my favorite B&M coaster that I've ridden, and it is a fun one. It has several great airtime moments, and I think it's way better than Nitro. This coaster has the 5-second floater hill, which in the back is definitely 5 seconds, but in the front, it's more like 3 or 4. Anyways, this coaster also has a decent color theme. I kind of like the brown and white. Let me know what you guys think. Anyways, this coaster has a pretty good first drop and a decent setting too, out in the woods like Nitro, but not as many trees. You can see this coaster from outside the park, and you can see it pretty well from inside the parking lot. This coaster has a pretty cool queue line and station, and I actually saw Extreme Thrills in the station on my first visit. On RCBD, it says that this coaster has 7 airtime points, which is probably right, because this coaster does have a lot of floater airtime, no ejector airtime though. Then this coaster also has a maneuver like this, which is definitely not something B&M usually does. But this coaster is very smooth and has very good restraints, and I think it's something most people can enjoy. Many of the general public and many people can enjoy this coaster, even little kids. This coaster is just barely a hyper with 210 feet, but you feel all of that. Anyways, let's move on from one hypercoaster to another with Skyrush. Now, this coaster is so polarizing, but it's so fun. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest coasters out there. On my first ride, I knew that this coaster was world class, and I was very surprised on how good it was. This coaster also has the world's fastest lift hill, which you can definitely see here. I'm pretty sure it goes 17 miles an hour. Anyways, this coaster's first drop really does feel like a car crash with this kink that is actually unexplainable. Now, I'm surprised I didn't gray out once on this coaster, but I don't know if I have a high tolerance or not. Anyways, this coaster has very strong airtime moments, but it can be a bit rough in the back left wing seat, which is all but one of my rides I rode it on. The second one, I rode it the second to front, which was significantly rougher, but not too bad. Anyways, I think this coaster's stangle dives are underrated. They're really fun, and this coaster just has so strong airtime. It's so good. This coaster's color scheme just looks really good too, and it's just so fun, guys. Anyways, let's move on from one elite coaster to another with Wildcats Revenge. This is my number 1 overall coaster, and it is so good. I love it so much, guys. This coaster has a really fun pre-lift. Then it goes really loudly on that lift hill where it catches it. And then it slowly does, going up the lift a few times, and then it goes regular mode. After that, you do a pretty fun first drop. Not too great, but still really fun. It still delivers strong ejector airtime, which proves how good this coaster is. Then it goes into the world's largest step-up underflip, which it does seem like it is very big. It is such a fun maneuver. It is so good. And it goes into plenty of other really great elements. The standout probably being that camelback, which had me almost standing on most of my rides. This coaster's inversions are way snappier in the front, which I noticed, they were pretty, almost janky, really, but very fun at the same time. This coaster's paint scheme looks my favorite. I love this coaster's color scheme. Black and red are my colors, and I really like them. This coaster only has really one moment of laterals with that double up with the slight turn, which is pretty fun. And the coaster's kind of wave turns are really cool too. This stall is absolutely amazing as well. Gives really good hang time. And, this coaster, there's the double down. It's really fun. This is the snappy 0G roll. And this coaster is just so smooth, so fast. The pacing is amazing. And this coaster is just the best in my opinion. Anyways, what do you think of my rankings? Comment down below what you would change or your list. Also, say if you enjoyed the video or not, because I thought this is one of my best videos. And anyways, Hershey Park is a world-class amusement park in Hershey, Pennsylvania that has very quality rides and very delicious milkshakes too. This park could be the best in America and even the world, but that's just me though. Anyways, make sure to like and subscribe because that would really make me very happy. Anyways, embrace the adventure and enjoy the ride. Skyline Coasters, goodbye.